Ready? Okay. Go ahead and take it away. Let me start your timer and you're good to go. All right, go right ahead.
Imagine a system where human beings were completely stripped of their dignity and of their most basic freedoms, where this shackled population was forced to work for pennies an hour, and if they refused to do so, they're met with cruel and unjust punishment. Now, given the context of this presentation, you might immediately think of the U.S. prison system. But you're wrong. What I just described to you was slavery. My name is Cooper Cummings.
Lars Reschenberg,
Carter Dals,
Keaton Halber,
Sawyer Hamilton, Gabe Bazan,
Rodrigo Rio Soto, and we're here to today follow up on an ethical dilemma where cheap labor comes at a costly ethical price. As DataWorks Internal Ethics and Compliance Task Force, we've been tasked with assessing this AI chatbot contract. After careful consideration, we still recommend saying no to prison labor. And to guide our approach and ensure ethical alignment, we'll start by discussing the prison system and Unicor to provide context for this decision. Then we'll outline our recommendation to forego prison labor for this project, acknowledging the trade-offs involved in upholding our ethical standards. Finally, we'll detail the next steps we propose to help DataWorks achieve its goals responsibly.
DataWorks is facing the ethical dilemma of using prison labor to train their new chatbot LLM. This raises questions surrounding fairness, human dignity, and the rights of inmates. Throughout this process, we identified three main problems with the proposal: labor exploitation, the systematic issues with the U.S. prison system, and the reputational integrity of DataWorks itself. DataWorks places high emphasis on their values of fairness, accountability, respect, and transparency. This is why we recommend we do not use prison labor, and instead, DataWorks finds another ulterior option that more closely aligns with their core values.
So now I'll be talking about Unicor and federal prisons. The Federal Bureau of Prisons was established due to a lack of central authority and control within the federal prison system. Today, the Bureau consists of 122 institutions, housing approximately 135,000 inmates and 35,000 employees. Now, there are two causes of concern within the Federal Bureau of Prisons. First, in the past 6 years, there have been 6 different directors within the Bureau. Second, President Biden just passed the Oversight Bill, which requires the Department of Justice to oversee every institution within the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Now let's look at the prisons themselves. If we look at the crime demographic, we can see that only 7% of inmates are violent criminals. Most of their crimes consist of nonviolent drug offenses and white-collar crimes. Additionally, these institutions provide education and rehabilitation programs. But that being said, 45% of prisoners are rearrested within only 3 years of their release.
Now, within these 122 institutions, Unicor partners with 65 of those to manufacture products and provide services, mainly sold to other government agencies. And the wages in these jobs range from 23 cents to $1.15 an hour. Now, Unicor boasts that 24% of inmates are less likely to reoffend after participating in Unicor, and this statistic is flawed. Firstly, this statistic is subject to selection bias, as well as it is marginal compared to the total population within federal prisons. And as Gabe mentioned, 93% of inmates are nonviolent offenders within federal prisons, and nonviolent offenders are less likely to reoffend with every criminal history category. So this begs the question, if we are targeting the incorrect demographic to rehabilitate. Furthermore, federal prisons offer many more rehabilitation and education programs, including many of which that are mandatory, like the Release Preparation Program, which offers mock job interviews as well as resume building. And these offer much more to the recidivism rate than just Unicor does. And not only is the statistic flawed, but this system is flawed. 4% of the revenue generated from prisoner-made products is recycled back into the system and given to prisoners as wages, and still 50% of these wages are garnished due to the IFRP targeting lower income inmates as well as limiting purchasing power within the prison system. So Unicor disguises themselves as a rehabilitation program, but in reality, they are an economic exploitative organization. So why would we buy into an unethical government agency that doesn't even work for its workers?
So how
how does Unicor get away with paying their prisoners only pennies an hour, and why don't they pay them at least minimum wage? Well, while the 13th Amendment outlawed slavery and ensured fair compensation, the FLSA's vague definitions of employee and employer created a gray area that lasted until the 90s, until these two legal cases set the precedent. That precedent being, private companies do not have control over the working conditions of their hired labor, and prison labor was deemed penological, not pecuniary. So if our workers are not even going to be legally considered employees, what does that make us?
Thank you, Sawyer. Our group found three main ethical concerns throughout our research. The first which I want to talk about is the exploitation of prison labor. The 13th Amendment essentially calls prison labor slavery by saying slavery is not okay unless it's that of a prisoner. In addition, federal prisons mandate their prisoners to work. Those who refuse often face harsh punishments such as solitary confinement. Many of the major cities in the United States rely on funding from the prison system. This is a process backed by police forces who focus on quotas rather than the quality of their arrests. Because of this, we have a 10% overcrowding rate. 1 in every 2 prisoners goes back to prison after a period of 8 years, and 6% of people currently behind bars are actually innocent. This is not a product of the people, but a product of a corrupt system that neglects the basic necessities. Prisons are currently underfunded by roughly $3 billion. However, back in March, prison infrastructure funding was cut 38%. As you see in this graph on the right, infrastructure funding requests for the budget have not been met since 2011. On top of this, prisons are understaffed. 93% of prisoners in Colorado noted that their prisons were understaffed, leading to the deterioration of their mental and physical health. In addition, a study from the BOP noted that 10% of the roles are currently vacant. The director of the BOP noted that the main goal of prisons, which is rehabilitation, is not being seen. Now we want to talk about the core values. Daniels Fund strives for fairness, trust, and respect. By going against the Daniels Fund values, as well as the DataWorks value statement of creating safe, reliable, and ethical AI systems, we go against the core values.
As DataWorks is already thriving and prides itself with a strong ethical foundation, we've chosen to decline prison labor, but this decision opens up other opportunities rather than limit us. We propose 2 alternative initiatives: a transparent ethics standards and pursuing certifications and industry alignment. And to uphold our values, we'll issue a clear public statement explaining our choice to avoid prison labor, and to make sure our message resonates, we'll actively seek input from all key stakeholders like employees and industry experts. Once we've incorporated this feedback, we'll publish our transparent ethics standards on our website and social media. This public statement demonstrates our decision as a proactive, values-driven strategy rather than a limitation. This next slide represents our journey from DataWorks' vision of an ethical AI leader to achieving a B Corp certification. This B Corp certification is a recognized standard of socially responsible business. To achieve B Corp status, we have to assess our practices and align with B Corp standards. And achieving this certification will solidify DataWorks' position as a leader in ethical AI. The need for ethical AI development is at an all-time high, and trust in government is at an all-time low. Studies show that 60% of US adults are uncomfortable with AI and healthcare diagnostics, and trust in AI companies has dropped from 50 to 35% over the last 5 years. These statistics present a clear opportunity for DataWorks to differentiate itself as a trusted brand and give the public ease of mind when using AI. This B Corp certification and transparent ethics message would act as a powerful differentiator that shows our commitment to both technological excellence and moral responsibility.
Now let's take a look at an instance where prison labor was at a point of ethical contention. In 2015, it came to light that Whole Foods was using prison labor in the production of their goat cheese and tilapia products through its partnership with the CCI. The public backlash was imminent. Mass media outlets crucified Whole Foods, and while they tried to defend their partnership by claiming that they were aiming to reduce recidivism, after their stock dropped 15% in the following month, they disbarred any future partnerships with the CCI. So let me ask you, would we want to subject our financial stakeholders to the same risk of that Whole Foods experience?
Now, what if we chose yes? As a team, we have decided that saying no to prison labor is the correct ethical decision, but we need to look at both sides. The ethical case for prison labor would be to provide inmates with real-world skills, the highest possible wage of just $2, a sense of purpose throughout the job that they are doing, as well as a medical chatbot that may benefit society.
There are also various benefits to each stakeholder with signing the NIH contract. Employees will have the opportunity to take upper-level division jobs within this new department of our company. Prisoners will have the opportunity to take a new job that provides them skills to help them assimilate into society. Owners of DataWorks will benefit from company expansion, and customers will be able to benefit from this public health LLM, providing them an alternative to the expensive programs within our healthcare system.
Now, this isn't the first time that the use of prison labor in AI development has been a topic of discussion. Finnish tech company Metrock actually uses prison labor to train their models by providing prisoners with the sample output from their model and then having them answer a yes or no question based on how relevant the output was to the inputted question. While the public reception to this has been somewhat neutral, there are major differences between the Finnish prison system, which is often heralded as a world leader in rehabilitation, versus the United States prison system, which represents 25% of the total incarcerated population of the world, while only representing 5% of the total world population. Now, with that being said, while there is an ethical argument to be made for using prison labor, the digital skills that prisoners would acquire in this role are arguably less valuable than the skills that they would acquire in their comparable manufacturing jobs. As well, while they are being paid the highest possible wage, this is still only $2 an hour, and half of this on average is going to be garnished by the IFRP. As well, based on anecdotal evidence we found in the Finnish case study, this would not provide prisoners with a greater sense of purpose than they would already have in the jobs that they currently do. As well, we believe that by establishing ourselves as an ethical leader, we not only can still win the NIH bid, but we can as well dissuade any public concern or skepticism in the process, increasing its overall use. So, in order for us to justify our recommendation as the best ethical option, you need to believe that the societal benefit of saying no to using prison labor is greater than the societal benefit of saying yes.
Our recommendation is that DataWorks does not move forward with the NIH contract. After careful analysis, we've determined that this decision reflects our core values, it promotes human dignity, and it mitigates risk. Prison labor completely disregards inmates' humanity, reducing them to nothing but a low-cost commodity. While it's often justified as rehabilitation, prison labor rarely provides meaningful skill development or growth opportunities post-release. When looking at the intended consequences of this recommendation, we found that employees will have greater trust in their leadership, knowing that DataWorks will make the right decision when put in an ethical dilemma. Prisoners will have a reduced false sense of hope and knowledge that the skills will be applicable after their release. Owners will have a reduced risk of backlash from a PR standpoint, and employees will be able to sleep easy at night knowing that they're not contributing to the prison industrial complex.
And while we believe that our proposal is ethically sound, there are still unintended consequences of our decisions. Employees will have an increased workload not alleviated by the help of inmates. Owners lose high revenue opportunities and a competitive advantage in their industry. Prisoners will continue to be exploited under the current prison labor systems. And if our proposal goes through, it could hinder the development of the LLM, impacting the millions of people who would gain access to it.
Now, putting the ethical net benefit aside, why would we choose an agency that acts without integrity? An agency that has a history of lacking accountability, fairness, respect, and transparency. An agency that treats their inmates as a low-cost commodity without the respect and fairness that human beings deserve. An agency that lines their pockets for the viability, disproportionately profit off of you.
So, after in-depth analysis, as the ethics and compliance team for DataWorks, if winning the NIH bid requires DataWorks to act as a facilitator of oppression, we cannot, in good conscience, recommend that DataWorks use prison labor as a means of cost effectiveness, and instead, we hope to be a trailblazer in the ethical AI development of the future. Thank you.
All right, well done. You finished 1 minute early, so we can have up to 11 minutes for questions, or we can end at 10. It's fine. I'll turn it over to our judges.
Great job. I have a question about the competition, like the competitive advantage or disadvantage argument. You went into it a little bit at the end, but I think there's an overall viewpoint that companies who do well financially can make a better positive impact. And you can't really make a positive impact if you're not doing well financially. So can you explain?
When you say competitive advantage, are you referring to the competitive advantage that would be realized when we use prison labor as a cheaper alternative?
Or just bidding on the NIH
Okay, so
contract
our framework on this was that we hope to differentiate ourselves in the bid process by justifying the higher price relative than what it would be if we use prison labor, by showing the NIH the net overall impact that would occur if we were to ensure the ethical, ensure being an ethical leader and having an ethical standard. Because there's significant mistrust, one, in the government and just in AI systems, and that's dramatized in healthcare. And so if we can demonstrate that we are a trustworthy organization, I think this would increase the overall use of that medical chatbot and increase the overall net benefit to society as a whole. Yeah.
So without the use of highly discounted labor, right, which
Yeah.
is kind of the genesis of this idea at all to use prison labor, how can you accept the NIH contract and still be profitable? Are there other aspects of the business that need to be squeezed? Like, where does that money come from?
I think that we would justify not necessarily having like the lower bid of what it would be if we used a discounted prison labor. I'm also curious on what the overall impact that would be on the total cost of developing that model, as I feel like click workers as a whole are not, like, you don't have to pay them very much, and I feel like you can outsource that labor. The ethics on that are contentionable, but as well we could pursue programs like funding marginalized communities within our cities, funding education programs within those communities that train these kids on how to train these models, and then from there being able to use their input as well as various other people that would participate in the training in the process of training the model.
And as well as this, in the prompt, it categorized DataWorks as a successful company with many different ventures.
Mhm.
So going into this medical AI chatbot form, then we do not really need to have this medical chatbot, but we would like to provide this
Mhm.
net benefit to our stakeholders. But as the prompt said, we are still a very successful company with many different ventures in the AI world.
Our position is if winning the NIH contract requires us to facilitate this impression and continue to incentivize this system and set the precedent also for other tech companies to come in and do the same. Because if one does it and it proves to be successful, then there's going to be many more that follow. So if that is what is required to win the NIH contract, then we don't want to be that company to do so.
Got it. So you guys are kind of assuming that the capital will come from other parts of the business because it's a successful business.
Yes.
And if you don't win it with your standards, then you don't want it. Is that
Yes.
fair? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent job really digging in and going above and beyond what was asked in a thorough analysis. I really loved how you looked at, what are the other risks that might influence the outcome, such as having 6 different prison leads and the different laws and the different case studies. So great job with that. You really reference and make a very strong moral argument here. You haven't mentioned the ethical frameworks that you're referring to, so I'm curious, how did you together come up with these 4 variables for your ethical case? The real world skills, highest possible wage, sense of purpose.
Well, actually, when we were first given this prompt, our team was completely split up on how we wanted to move forward with this. Up until right before we had to submit the summary, we were completely split. So what that did is it gave us great perspective on both ends of the problem, and we were able to use our perspective from the yes to figure out that those are really the things that matter in that argument, and use that, slideshow.
And I think it helped us develop our rebuttal as well. We actually created 2 separate executive summaries because we were down to the wire, where we were debating up until the hour of submitting. And so we were very split at first. Yeah.
In the end, are you all aligned?
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
Great.
Any questions from, yeah, please.
Okay, so I'm very curious. As you said, if you don't end up pursuing prison labor, then you would go forward with just paying for the contract and finding alternative sources of labor. I'd like to connect like two parts of your presentation. So first of all, if you take that approach, B Corp certifications are incredibly expensive to go forward with. So DataWorks would have to figure out the capital for that. On top of the fact that if you're in the prompt, it said that in order to be able to afford the contract, they need to use affordable labor. So I'm just curious where to kind of like push more about the funding aspect, like where would they get the funding for both of these things without outsourcing from like child labor?
I can touch on the B Corp certification first. Since we already pride ourselves on being the leader of ethical AI, I don't think the cost would be as high or expensive as it would be for any other company. I think we already show that we are ethical. So in doing so, we just gotta look at our processes and try to, maximize the B Corp standards.
And then in terms of where we would receive the capital on how we would build the actual model, within the prompt, it's very vague on how successful, and it doesn't provide any financials of the company itself. So I don't know, as the ethics and compliance team, we have confidence in DataWorks based on their prior history. We could even go out, we could run around with debt financing, we could even sell equity, we could issue more equity. I feel like there would be variable ways in which we would justify creating this chatbot that overall would help society and ideally provide a higher rate of return than that invested capital.
Also, aside from that, this specific contract does require low-cost labor that we're competing for, but if we don't necessarily win the contract with the prison labor, that is completely okay with us. We do not want to use prison labor. We're not saying that we're never going to get involved in the medical AI industry, but if it takes more time for us to build up the funds to pay for this, we will wait rather than using prison labor.
Say that I'm like an angry shareholder approaching you guys from the standpoint that the goal of the business is to make money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have like I have a good enough understanding of B-Lab certifications to understand that there's wiggle room in those guidelines to accept prison labor as like a viable business model. How would you guys respond to me?
I would say look at the precedents. Look at Whole Foods. What happened to them as a shareholder in the following month of Whole Foods coming out that they actually use prison labor just in the production of their goat cheese and tilapia, which I've never bought goat cheese or tilapia from Whole Foods. But just based on them using that, their stock dropped 15% in the following months. So I would ask you, like, do you like the current share price that you have, and would you like that to continue to appreciate in the future?
So your presentation solution of like releasing a public statement and earning a B Corp certification really focuses primarily on DataWorks as your key stakeholder. So I wanted to ask like, how does your solution alleviate specifically the exploitation of prisoners and kind of turning your stakeholders to focus towards prisoners as well, since you said that they're like all the stats you guys had about like their exploitation. I'm just curious.
I mean, it just gives exposure to the prison labor. I mean, we're getting the feedback from the industry experts saying, all right, we're not going to use prison labor. And then we're talking to the whole public, all of our customers, anybody who's interested in the medical field, and saying, hey, prison labor is probably being used for this medical chatbot. It's not right, and we should do something about it.
So kind of just bringing awareness to it.
Yeah.
And as we kind of mentioned before, we touched on it a little bit, but by us going into prisons and using their labor, that kind of sets a precedent. That's not something that's happening with current AI companies. And as technology and software just continues to grow, we're going to see a lot more of those companies coming in. And if we set the precedent that we can use prison labor, it's going to be something that all companies do, because it's very cheap, very affordable, it's very easy to use, and yeah, that we think that outweighs the benefit of the cheap labor.
We want to be the trailblazer of ethical AI development, not the trailblazer of using prisoners to train our AI.
I want to touch on this question a little bit, because obviously what you're saying is right. Our two solutions don't address the prisoners specifically, but by saying no to this contract, we're saying no to the prison system as a whole. And I'm not saying that we're not obliged to help these prisoners, but we disagree with the system as a whole. And what it takes to change that is massive legislative change, which we as DataWorks are not necessarily in a position to do as much as it sucks. As much as we care deeply about this problem, there's not anything that we can do if we refuse this contract to help them individually other than lobby for this problem and raise awareness for it.
Last question.
So with what you just said, as you're saying no to this contract, is saying no to the prison system as a whole, it might not come across that way. It might just come across that you're avoiding like the the problem versus taking one stance or another.
I completely understand that point, but as I was saying, this is not something that we're avoiding just because we don't want to deal with the problem. This is something we're avoiding because we don't believe in this problem. And that's what we're establishing in our transparency letter to our stakeholders.
Miss the transparency.
No, okay. And I think that poses kind of an ethical conundrum because there's a lot of forms of low-cost click worker labor that is very ethically contentious, whether it be click workers in places such as Asia or certain places like around the world that are using click workers and they're paying them even less than what the prisoners are currently being paid. It kind of poses an ethical conundrum where we could help them, we could also help these people and help these people and help these people.
Excellent.
So
We're out of time. Thank you very much. All right. Team 11.